you don't got a set of balls, why bother? Compression test this thing. So if my assumptions are correct, I think the piston rings are wiped, and I think the cylinder lining is scratched up something terrible because it had no oil in it. And we're going to find out doing a compression test on this. We got two options. We can either A, rebuild this engine, or I can just swap it out. Swapping an engine out sounds crazy, but to be honest with you, me taking the time to pull this engine, pull it apart, hone it, maybe bore it out, put a new, and rebuild the engine is way more time consuming and way more costly to the customer rather than putting an engine in. So I have no clue where my compression tester is, so I'm going to use my leak down tester. Same thing, it's not going to hold it. So anyway, took the spark plug, tied this in, and now let's start it to see what it does. You see that? I'm only getting to 40 psi. That's a shame. So the engine is shot. Another thing I want to show you guys is the difference between how much compression that engine has versus this one. Is watch when I crank this thing over, okay? You see it just cranks? Just cranks. It's like nothing's fighting this engine. It spins no problem. All right, you see how it just cranks? A good engine, when it's spinning, it's going up a compression stroke, and then it has compression, right? So it should be fighting you. And like I'm just able to like really spin this thing by hand, no problem. And really you should be having a compression stroke where it's fighting you and then it kicks back. Let's lower the throttle a little bit. Yeah, she sounds good, man. So I've been working so late that unfortunately I just got to get up earlier in order to make some of these repairs for customers. So I pushed this small John Deere riding tractor into the garage, and I'm going to put this John Deere 16 horsepower engine and replace it with the 17 horsepower engine that is in it. This is actually a better quality engine because of the cast iron sleeve. So let's start. Let's just do it. It is easier just to get the hood up and out of the way. You don't need to mess with it. So each hood is slightly different, but they're pretty much the same. These hoods just sit in a bracket in the front, and you have to look and see where the hinge is in the bracket. But literally, you're going to be moving this thing, and then you're going to pick it up and get it out at the same time. And like, see how easy that was? I didn't even have to look. I was just doing it by feel. And you're going to want to disconnect the lights for the headlights. If you got them, usually they burn off. Alright, so with the hood aside, next thing you want to do is remove the connections off of the motor. So I'm going to take you over here and show you what connections we have to disconnect. So you will have to disconnect your starter wire because that's going to have to go. This is your main harness. All right, this is going to get unplugged and this will stay with the tractor. We will have to reconfigure a new harness for the new engine because the new engine has a different plug orientation, but it's going to be pretty much the same thing. Next, we're going to disconnect the ground, so we got to find that. For the ground, you want to follow the negative terminal. This one goes all the way down to the frame itself. So we actually don't have to worry about disconnecting it because we're not changing that. It doesn't go to the motor mount. Sometimes these go to the motor mount. This one does not, just go straight to the frame. We will then also need to disconnect the throttle cable here. So this is your throttle and clutch cable. Gets connected here. And then we will have to disconnect our fuel supply as well. So I'm going to zip all that off and then we'll move on to the next step. So I got all the wiring disconnected and the throttle linkage and the fuel line. So that's all good. Now I'm looking at the exhaust. And I will have a challenge here because Deere put an exhaust drop down port here for this frame, on this frame, and then on this side here. So probably for single or dual motors. And the exhaust on the new engine actually goes directly in the center. So I'm gonna have to modify something. But before I can get this engine out, I need to get the exhaust out. So literally I just unbolted this exhaust here and the tube just comes out. So this is pretty rinky-dinky that Deere's doing. I get it makes sense because it's easy for assembly, and it's just a slip fit exhaust. So it's fine. It's just a mower, but kind of cheesy. I have to take the exhaust out. I got to take the muffler out. The muffler bolts to the frame. So I have to take a couple guards off. The first guard I got to take off, or I should say the first bracket, is the bracket for the hood. So I already pre-took out some of the bolts. So this hood bracket I'm going to put with the hood. But I also have a cover here, the front cover. These look like 8 millimeters. I'm going to take those out, and then it looks like I just have these two bolts, and then the muffler should drop out. I need to take that muffler out because I need clearance to put the new muffler in. I guess I got to pull up. They got these little dumb tabs. Yeah, you just got to pull up. Pull up and the guard comes off. There goes the muffler. So the next thing I got to do is I'm going to jack the tractor up in the air. There are only four mounting bolts that bolt to the frame here. You can see those there. You got to take those four off. You have to take those four off, and then we got to take the belt and the pulley off, and then we can pull the motor. I got a jack stand sitting in the center of the frame. So now that's lifted, we can get underneath it, remove those four mounting bolts and the pulley as well. The pulley should be 5/8 and the mounting bolts are usually always 9/16, but everything's been metric on this tractor so far, so we'll see. So to get to this, you're going to have to take this pin out. It's this whole adjustment pin for the front deck. So let's do that now. I hate these goofy pins. You have to twist and pull them out. They're like safety pins, but just a pain in the ass. Take that washer. So I'm going to prop up the front deck with my hand, pull that pin out, and drop the deck. Now that gives me access to zip this off. This is a 5/8. So the only thing holding these on is really the belts. Now this belt we can pull out, so that belt's off. You will have to drop this a little bit in order to get the top belt off. So I'm going to pull on this. Oh, there we go. I'm going to let that hang, and then you can see you got this top belt on the top pulley. That's for transmission, and I'm just popping that off. I'll leave it like that. There is an idler pulley on this. Really, it's the brake pedal. So we'll make sure that's depressed before reinstalling this. So with that out of the way, we now have to take out the four mounting bolts on the engine. And it's going to be really hard for me to video it, but pretty much they're all either they should be 9/16, they might be 5/8, but I'm pretty sure they're 9/16. I'm going to take those four off, and then we can lift the engine out. Now that the mounting bolts are removed, we should be able to just lift this out, assuming I disconnected everything. And we did. So we can bring that engine to the scrapyard. Now we have to look at putting this engine in the tractor. Let's take a look at what we got to do. I don't know if I'm going to have to remove the muffler. I'm probably going to have to cut a notch out of this so that the muffler has a place to go. But coincidentally, there's this hole right here. You know what? I'm not fucking around. Let me just take this muffler off and go from there. Alright. Let's slip this puppy in. And just see what it looks like sitting in there. Okay. Let me take the camera over here to show you. They give you multiple mounting locations depending on what motor goes on this thing. And it looks like it's going to fit on the first hole and the first hole there. So that's cool. And I got clearance on the backside. So that is good as well. Another huge positive, which I wasn't expecting, is I have this hole right here, which honestly it looks like the muffler is going to fit right in there. Look at this shit. Okay, now we got a little more clearance. And let's do a test fit. By God, we are there. She tight. She tight. One thing I do want to show everybody is the fuel shutoff solenoid. So this threads to the bottom of the bowl of the carburetor. This not only fastens the bowl to the carburetor, but this is a little solenoid that has a little plunger on the end. And these go bad, and sometimes your engine won't start because these are just failed in the closed state, which is fully plunged out. You can see it's spring-loaded. So to test these things, an easy test is to push down, make sure it springs back up. If it doesn't spring back up, you got a bunch of shit corroded in there, or you blew a spring, but usually there's shit corroded in there. It's a 50-50 shot if you can clean them out and get them to bounce back again. But another good test is to hook up a power supply. You want to hook positive up to here. This is where the main connection is. Now the main housing itself acts as a ground. So I'm going to push this close to the camera, and I'm going to use this wire. I'm going to touch the housing. You see how the plunger puts in? So when you turn the key on, plunger opens and allows fuel to go to the carburetor. They started doing these because it prevents backfiring. So when you shut the engine off, it stops the fuel to the carburetor and prevents from any backfiring. Sorry guys, but I needed to skip a few steps ahead. I just need to crank it out. So I put the guard back on for the muffler, so that looks legit. I put the throttle cable back on. It was plenty long enough, so that worked out. And then what I did is I also tied the fuel line in. I had to make a longer 5/16 fuel line. But then the hardest part is the wiring. So the wiring was slightly different on this thing. So you can see I have this like rat's nest of wiring left. But when you turn the key, you have to check things. You need a meter in order to get this right. And you can see right now I have it wired to the battery. So I got 12.63 volts to the battery. So you need to make sure you got 12 volts going to your solenoid, to your fuel supply. You also need to make sure all your grounds are set right. You need to make sure you're having your 12 volt supply, which is this plug here and this one here. Make sure that 12 volt supply is going to the coil. And then you need to make sure that you are charging your battery, because that's very important. And if you don't set your If you don't put your wiring in right, you're going to overheat your wiring, melt it. Also, you're going to make sure you're setting the right direction for your stator, your voltage direction. So you need to do all that with your voltmeter and your key supply. So for this one here, I have, this one's going to be a dead leg. We're going to leave that off. If we needed to do an alternate power supply for something, we could do that, but we're going to leave that off. This one here, which is your red wire in this connector, which goes to this black wire, that's going to go to your starting solenoid. So when you go to start, that'll go to your starter solenoid, and that tells you what direction the motor's going in. And then you're going to have this wire, which is going to go to your red wire on your key switch, which goes back to your battery. And pretty much when your key's on, you got 12. This is recharging, so it's going to be like 13 volts, and it's recharging the battery. Hopefully I explained that well, but you also want to test it. So I'm going to start this motor up. So you can see we've got 12.62 volts. And let's turn throttle on. I got this thing jacked up, but so we got 12.61 volts, key on, and it starts to drain. So let's see if it starts. So you can see it started right up, and I'm stepping away because it's so fucking loud, but so you can see how it goes up to 13 volts. But anyway, you can see how it peaks up to 13 volts. That just shows you that the stator is recharging the battery accordingly. Alright? So now that I don't have to scream, what I'm going to do next is I am going to clean up this wiring. I'm going to use some heat shrink, some electrical tape, just so that it looks decent. And then I can button up the rest of this mower. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the deck back on, you know, the front bracket that I took off, and then we'll put the hood back on, and then drive it around. Well, I gotta say, overall, I'm pretty happy with this this build, and you know, I'm just gonna give it a good old douche, give it back to the customer, and off we go. But in all reality, I'm pretty pleased. I mean, the hood sits nice, the engine looks good, it doesn't smoke, it starts up, and yeah, I mean, she's sitting pretty, you know. So I'm going to get this tractor loaded up onto my trailer and get it delivered tomorrow. But we're going to badge this sucker and say we're good to go.